Welcome to Breakthrough Minds with Raj Mahapatra. I'm Raj, and I get to sit in the room where cutting-edge technology is being built. And the conversations I'm part of are just too good not to share. That's what this podcast is all about. Imad, thank you so much. I am so excited about doing this conversation. As you know, from the very first time we talked it must have been last summer.
Must have been end of last summer.
It was such a fascinating conversation because we were talking about agentic AI before anyone else was talking about agentic AI. You know, that whole conversation hadn't even kicked off. What I'd love you to do before we get going properly is my very first question to everyone is going to be the same question. This is our first podcast. Mm-hmm. So this is my first question to this interview. Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. If you allow me, just a very big thank you for having me as part of that of the podcast series and for doing kind of that very first one with me. I've always super enjoyed our conversation, so I'm very excited kind of to be part of that that endeavor that you're on. So, who am I and what do I do? So my name is Imad. I'm the founder of Honu AI. We are a company that's building the technology that would enable businesses to become fully autonomous. Background has been academically robotics, neuroscience, alternated working in bigger companies and startup over the last 10, 15 years. Worked at places like Goldman Sachs, like Meta here in the UK. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I'm mostly passionate about is I'm very lucky that that's exactly kind of what I'm doing. And that's shaping the future of the economy. And what does a world look like when you can have entities that can run businesses autonomously, and what that really means kind of for the economy.
I love that so much. And it gets me into my very first question for you, straight off the bat. Agentic AI, we're hearing about it everywhere right now. I've made some notes, I have to be honest about it, because I knew I was going to forget things first interview and all that. Mm-hmm. So it's everywhere right now. How close are we really to the point where every function of a mid-sized company or mid-sized firm can be done through agentic AI?
Okay, so there's a lot in that question that needs to be kind of deconstructed. And I think you also need, I don't think kind of we're close to having every function of every kind of mid-sized company.
Okay.
Kind of solved. I don't think kind of we're there. I think it's where you are on that spectrum not only depends on the size of the company, but also kind of very much depends on the kind of the company.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think kind of that we'd be able to have a mid-sized construction company that's going to be fully automated by agentic AI.
Yeah.
At least kind of very soon. But if you were to look at, for instance, a fully digitized business, the simplest thing that would come to mind is whether it be a SaaS business or drop shipping business. I think kind of we're not too far off.
Yeah.
I really don't think kind of that we're too far off. Because I think kind of at the end of the day, you still need. So part of it is access to the data.
Yeah.
And part of it is the sophistication of the AI. And I think there are some bits in between, which I think kind of we'll get kind of to talk about kind of at some point. So access to the data is crucial. So unless your AI agents or your AI has access to data, this is not going to work fully autonomously, right? And when I say access to data, I'm not talking about just access to data like in ERPs. You need to think about this a bit more similar to how people think about building robots, right? As in, you need also to be able to have a very closed loop system.
Yeah.
And by closed loop, I mean you can be resting on a lot of data that you have access to, make decisions, but you also need to be able kind of to observe the environment, try to assess the impact that you've had on the environment, and to be able to learn two things. One, whether your understanding of the environment is what you started with.
Yeah.
Is there anything that has happened that completely breaks my understanding of this environment that I'm operating on?
Okay.
Right. As in, I know, if say, for instance, kind of you're an e-commerce business and kind of you do some kind of action on your ads, and you're expecting, and you're not doing anything else, and you're expecting kind of most of your traffic to just be coming from that. And then you see kind of a surge of like, 10,000 people visiting kind of your website. And you're like, yes, but where do these come from? Like, as in, some things when you observe the world might question your representation of that world. So that's kind of one. So this is why you need the closed loop. And then the second thing is like, you really need to be constantly assessing your estimates of the impacts of the actions that you're taking, because this is at the end of the day what planning really is.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, you as a business owner or as someone running a business, if you're really, I'm oversimplifying here, but at the end of the day, like, it's a huge resource allocation problem, right? Where you've got a finite amount of resources, which could be cash or assets or all of this. Yeah. And you as a company, you're creating a system that is able to transfer these finite assets, whether they're kind of, again, or present today or kind of the promise of them, into more assets and more outcome.
Yeah.
Right. And you need to make your decisions about, okay, so I've got these assets. How do I allocate my efforts? Like, as in, if I tell you this thing is going to return to you kind of 50% on your investment on the short term, and this other thing is going to return you 10%, all else being equal.
But what we're talking about here is that, we are used to doing all those things as individuals in a boardroom, having those conversations, or every level of the business having those conversations. And the challenge here, I think, is what you're trying to say is, how do you take all those decision-making processes, all those different minds in a room, all the different strategic elements of it, and put them through an agentic system?
100%. But and there are a lot of things that I think happen when we make decisions that aren't just kind of sheer data.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of the people call it like maybe kind of tacit or implicit knowledge.
Yeah.
Like how the different bits of business connect together, what this really means, like your intuition about what a business works.
You call this the cognitive layer, don't you?
Yeah. So I call kind of like, I think one of the things, so when I was initially saying like, you've got the data, you've got the AI, and you most probably need something in between. I think that's the thing kind of that I'm talking that is most probably in between, because if you really want the AI to be able to not just make better decisions, but also collaborate, and we might get to that kind of a bit later, you also need that implicit knowledge that is in people's head to become explicit.
Yeah.
And be like, the same way that you have data, you have kind of, this is the knowledge of how the business works. This is how everything is related together. These are the mechanics or the physics of the business and of the ecosystem. And so you need to make those available for your agents the same way kind of that you're making data available for your agents.
Yeah.
So that's what we call kind of the cognitive layer. And that's kind of one of the key innovations that we're pioneering kind of at Honu.
I love that. I love it so much. Now, two things I forgot to flag at the top of this interview. The first thing is that I've got no microphone stand. You've noticed it. People have probably noticing it if they're watching the video. And my arm's getting quite tired here. So I just need to work out how I do this and make it a better solution here. But I think I've got there. And I don't know about you, but...
Well, just thinking. I could...
No, I think we'd be all right there. I think we'll be all right.
We could swap if you want at some point as well. Like, you can have the stand and I'm holding the microphone.
At some point today, the stand will arrive and we'll be wondering why we bothered doing this. We could have done this another moment of the day. It'll be fine. There's so much to unpick in what you just said. This whole idea of the cognitive layer. And when we first talked about this, it was, for me, it was the very first time anyone was talking about agentic AI. We were talking about really ground shifting things. And there are a few people now doing this. And, there's some of the big companies talk about agentic AI and how you implement it. And we're seeing more and more agentic becoming part of the conversation. Realistically speaking, what are the blockers here?
So I think, if I were to think about the blockers to get to full autonomy, like I would put them in three big buckets.
Well, actually, rather than full autonomy, let's talk about it a different way. Let's think about it as, when we think about agentic AI, a lot of people are using the word self-thinking.
Yeah.
So, we can have a whole conversation about what it means to think. And I know that, when people interact with AI, they say, so what do you think to the AI system? And it's, personifying AI is one of the great challenges and one of the big questions of the time. But, is it self-thinking? Is it autonomous? Well, you could touch on that if you want as well. But what are the blockers to that? So
I'm going to answer the first question, then I'll get to kind of the second one. I think the first, so the three kind of big blockers to me today kind of are one, that even if you're to look at even a small enterprise, like most of the data sets kind of fragmented in its own silos with its own systems, with its own kind of intelligence system. So it's like even having that holistic representation, that holistic understanding where everything is interconnecting, understanding where the fit kind of doesn't really exist out of the box. Secondly, is a bit kind of what you mentioned, is like, and I think this might be a bit controversial, but when we say, like, how sophisticated are these thinking systems today? What is an agentic AI?
Yeah.
We've got strong opinion towards that, and I'll delve into that a bit more.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of mention the third thing. And I think the third thing is like the ecosystem in which these like agentic AI or autonomous businesses you want them kind of to operate is not really built for autonomy. There's a lot of friction, right? Like even kind of where you want to go in and kind of register your company or want to do a payment or you want to do things. Yes, there are some solutions, but most of the time it's like they're designed to have a human in the loop.
Yes.
Right. And you've gotten some of these kind of protocols that are now kind of coming out that are making this easier, whether it's like MCP or A2A or these things that don't necessitate kind of having a human in the loop where you can have systems kind of talking to each other.
Yeah.
So we can get back to that in a second. But what we were just kind of talking about, like that second pillar, which is thinking and reasoning. It might be my background, but like I think we need to be very careful about how we define thinking and reasoning. To me, I like to define it a bit more as in Kahneman's like system 2.
Yeah.
Right. So it's system 2 thinking. It's like if you're really thinking as a human, like what you're most probably doing is that you're building a cognitive model or representation of the problem that you want to solve, and you're kind of running not complex, but you're doing kind of scenario analysis, trying to reason about it. That's kind of what reasoning is.
Yeah.
And then you come up with an answer. It could be the completely wrong answer because it's also kind of subject to biases and all these things. Now, the LLMs aren't out of the box doing that for sure. Like they're not. And I think we might be, it's very interesting because like, I don't want to get too technical, but like the LLMs basically confound the representation of the problem, which is what I called kind of the cognitive model, with figuring out the solution, with the communication. It's like all three functionalities bundled into one big bundle, which is impossible to entangle.
I love that.
Yeah. And the problem here is that, and interestingly, because these are most of when we talk about agentic AI, I think we're mostly kind of talking about LLMs. These are large language models. They're kind of trained by definition on them being eloquent.
Yeah.
Which also plays to a human bias that we have, because like I think it's one of the biases, like if someone speaks kind of very well, then they understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right. And so there are many things at play here. Like as in, it's not just how they represent the problem, whether they can think properly, but as in us as humans, sitting on the other side asking a question, you've got like that system that's very eloquently tells, yes, I thought about this, this, and this, and this is kind of what the thing is. But it's like,
yeah, I love this because so much of what we talk about, and we've talked about this as well before, is this idea that as we're talking, and as I'm talking to you now, I'm thinking what my next word should be, what the word after that should be, what I should say after that. What we forget when we talk LLMs is that it doesn't have necessarily an end goal. It's trying to predict the next thing or the next phrase that makes the most sense within the context. When we're thinking, the self-thinking aspect of what we do is that we have a global view of something, and we're trying to navigate the global view using our knowledge of language.
Yes. I mean, so I do agree kind of with what you're saying.
And Higgum to disagree.
No, I think they're different. Look, they're different kind of school of thoughts. I mean, as in, again, I don't think, the whole kind of linguistics and how we come up with language, and when we talk about this, is a whole kind of is a whole discipline which has different school of thoughts which they don't kind of agree on. Like even kind of what is reasoning, what are thoughts, even in neuroscience or cognitive behaviors, cognitive sciences, like you do have also kind of different schools of thoughts. It's not something that's been like solved. It's not something that is kind of fully understood. Like even in neuroscience, you talk about the explanatory gap.
Yeah.
Right. It's like there's no full understanding of that. So I think like it's also kind of fair to say, let's treat that as a bit of a black box, as how humans kind of really think. Let's put this aside. Now, the LLMs, I think, kind of like you're 100% right in saying kind of that they're kind of trying to predict the next sequence. they're not just optimizing to be eloquent. I think there's a lot of technologies that have evolved where kind of it is quite a complex, super interesting kind of technology. But I think we still need to be very conscious that unless they have, I mean, at least, again, this is my school of thought of what I think about reasoning. Is like, unless there is a representation, cognitive model of the thing that you're trying to solve for, I will not equate that to proper reasoning. And you have people who've been kind of talking about this for ages. Some people talking about it, some people talking and doing things about it. Like I think Gary Marcus for the longest time has been talking a bit about neurosymbolic, even kind of when you had deep learning, even before LLMs. It's like, what does it mean for this AI to understand? You've got people who are kind of pro, you've got people who are kind of against it. And you've got also kind of people a bit like Jan LeCun, who's like the chief AI scientist at Meta, who's recently been talking more and more about the fact that if you really want LLMs to be able to reason, they need to have a world model, a world representation. So I think, look, it's interesting. There's room for debate. There are different opinions. We're taking a very clear kind of position.
We're making it really easy, and it's not easy at all. And I think that the one thing that I'm really aware of, I posed the question, then I got distracted by self-thinking, but we didn't actually go back to the idea of what are the blockers to that self-thinking model right now. Do you have a view on that?
So, if we are approaching this in terms of like that self-thinking is going to be achieved through a more accurate representation of the problem space, then the challenges shift from very sophisticated AI to how do you come up with these representations of the problem? Like how do you build that virtual representation of the problem that represents the problem, that can be understood by the AI systems and by code and by such a way that they can use that to be able kind of to reason about the problem, right? So it's not like there's no issue if you think about it differently. It's actually just kind of shifts the focus a bit more. And how do you build these representation? What is the level what is the level of resolution or accuracy that you really need to have, right? I mean, when I was doing kind of my graduate studies, I was fortunate enough to be part of the core team that started what became the Human Brain Project in Europe. That was like Blue Brain started in 2005. And then kind of the Human Brain Project, I think, kind of became a project in 2011. But there kind of the task was, we wanted to have kind of computational representation of the brain for biological simulation purposes, not to get AI out of it. The reason I'm mentioning this is that you don't have the same level of accuracy of data at every single level of how the brain works, and you have kind of huge gaps where there's really no information. Right. And so your approach to modeling every single level is going to be different. What I mean by that is like you can end up modeling an ion channel, which is like you have kind of thousands and thousands of those in every single neuron in your brain as a set of chemical reactions or chemical equations. That's great. But like I can't model everything else, including the chemistry inside of the cell, to the same level of accuracy. So I might replace this with kind of a higher resolution model which just represents it. And I think kind of our approach to modeling the world, or kind of even a business, kind of will also require that, which is a bit of a art but science of
it's really funny. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, because I've been thinking about old tech, and this is a hilarious thing about old tech, and thinking about crypto and and blockchain. And I've got a lot of engineering friends who, when I mention the word blockchain, they'll just groan at me about blockchain and what the solution is. But actually, it's interesting you make that alignment with the human body. And so much about what happens in the human body is it's a science, but it's an art. You know, what works for you may not work for me, at a fundamental level, not because the systems work differently, but because there's so many different systems working at the same time. How it will play out exactly for your environment and my environment are different. When we talk about crypto, the reason why crypto works is because you've got every step of the way, you've got blockchain involved, so you can track a decision from here to the other end without any issue at all. You can say, and then if there is an issue, you then question the transaction. So that's why it works. But with LLMs, with the black box, not black box thinking, because that's a very different thing, but the black box that is an LLM, where decisions gets taken and it could be a million lines of code that's driven a decision, or a million lines of reasoning in inverted commas that drives a decision. And the same way as a human brain, you can't say exactly why you took a decision, but you know that it felt right.
Yeah.
How do you then, and it kind of gets to, for me, it gets to this whole question about what you're doing, the whole agentic approach to business and the self-thinking business, using AI for that, is if you have a self-thinking business, and we talk about that cognitive layer, and you've got the AI and you've got the data underneath it, and you've got the cognitive layer, and you're replicating that, and you've got all these different processes going on, and it's an art. How then do we have agency and responsibility and fiduciary duties within an organization?
There are different ways of thinking of the self-thinking business. You can think, because there are different ways on how to operate. I'll just give you kind of two ones. One is like you can have like one godlike agent, like master agent that understands everything's plugged into all of the data. Give it all of cognitive layer or not cognitive layer.
Yeah.
It looks at the whole thing. It makes kind of all of the decisions. And then it could dispatch that to either call them tactical agents or tools and kind of gets things done. But it's like you've got kind of one master brain. You've got another approach which kind of the business as a system is self-thinking, but you've got multiple agents that are working together that are optimizing the business and coming up with decisions. So you can have like a CMO agent, CEO agent, CFO agent, which are kind of, it's not a hierarchical kind of approach to this, but it's more as in kind of a collaborative approach on how the different kind of AI systems need to work together. The underlying technology that supports both systems, although might be kind of at 60, 70% similar, it still has a good chunk that is different.
Yeah.
Because when you have multiple agents, you need to have kind of the multiple agents that are able to collaborate, work together, understand each other, have the same representation of the problem space, understands each other roles, what to delegate, what to do things, all this. It has a lot of pros, it has some cons to it as well. But I just want to mention kind of that you've got these two things.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I'm saying this is like, if you want to come back also kind of to the question you're asking, which is, if I'm getting this right, is like us as humans. Was the question about us kind of as humans in the context of autonomous business, like what is the agencies that we have? Or was your question kind of more about?
So us, we have, and we have a system of rules, regulations, laws, societal norms based around the idea that we understand the fallibility of humans, but we also understand the ability for humans to take responsibility for their actions. We are now having to really think about these problems in a different way, because if we're going to say we can have a self-thinking business and every aspect of a business in your sense is going to be, you've got there's two different models, the godlike one, or you've got the different models within it that create the overall. If it's either one of those two things, how do you then, if we don't necessarily understand the fallibility of the system, and we can't track it, we can't question it in the same way, I'm imagining a situation in the future where we've got a court case and we say to the judge says, how do we get here? And the answer is, here is a printout of of 1 million pages of paper, which shows how this decision was taken. How do we then unpick that process? We talk about human in the loop. At the moment we have human in the loop, but actually this is now, we're talking about a self-thinking business where there is no necessarily human in the loop how does human in the loop work?
Yeah, so I think that's an excellent question. I think I think your question is, if I were to slightly rephrase it, it's like, at which points do you put the guardrails and which bits do you put kind of the humans?
Yeah.
So that you've got not only observability, but also a bit of accountability in that. I think they need to exist at different levels in the system. So first of all, kind of the way you're designing the technology on top of which these AI agents kind of run or kind of they're using needs to have at least some way of tracking the decisions that are happening, like or tracking, I'll call them line of thought, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's just kind of text, whatever kind of it is, you need to have at least kind of have some kind of at least understanding of what the sequence, even if it's a sequence of word, led to that thing. So that's kind of the trace itself.
Yeah.
Right. I think secondly, you need to have some rules that are encoded, like properly encoded rules. And if they can't sit in the AI agents, then they need to sit at the layer where the actions happen, right? So even if you want to think about it kind of like, I don't know, like say kind of you want to put an ad out. I mean, you might not want to be able to advertise, like you might not want to have a theme that's like around war or around kind of, I don't know, like drugs or around like there's some level of compliance that you need to introduce.
Yeah.
Which there are a lot of technologies out there that if you show them something, they can look at it and be like, actually, like, no, like that's, you shouldn't be there. Like, and social media companies have a lot of that as well. Right? Like when they're monitoring also kind of posts and monitoring advertising and monitoring. So that technology still has a place kind of to sit there, right? Like, it's like, yes, your AI agents are doing things, but even if it was a human, like you want a layer that's really kind of monitoring the output.
Yeah.
Right? So I think kind of having, even if you can't really understand the black box in which some of these agents are making the decisions, are making the reasoning or they're thinking about things, I think at the bit where the action happens, you can definitely have kind of a layer that's monitoring, okay, so however you came up with this, right? Like your responsibility is to give me, say, kind of an ad campaign. Fine, you're doing this. But then kind of there's another system that's really kind of checking. And that system could be either systems that already exist, as I said, that social media use.
Yeah.
It could also be kind of a different agent. It could be 10 agents. It could be actually like a consortium of agents from different people that are looking kind of, you can plug them in and they can do compliance. So you have that. So that's kind of, I think, kind of on the action. So you've got rules. You can add kind of additional initial checks as well at the time of execution and of telling decision. And I think thirdly, I think this transition shifts the importance in terms of the roles a bit more, maybe away from the CEO and more into the shareholders. What I mean by that is that I think kind of today in how companies are operating, your company might be might have a mission, might have a vision, and then you bring in a CEO or you've got kind of a group of people that are looking at the data and kind of trying to drive it kind of in that direction.
Yeah.
I think that in a world where you can have, especially for these specific sets of business that we discussed, you can show them the data. They can understand a bit the ecosystem and they can make decisions. They most probably be able to make more optimized decisions than a CEO. That being said, you still need to give them the constraints and the objectives within which they're optimizing. So what I mean by that is like if the shareholders like will want to be able to say, for instance, like I want this company to have a zero carbon footprint.
Yeah.
I want like sustainability to me is very important. It is more important for me to have the highest or kind of a very high customer satisfaction score at the expense of making kind of more revenue, right? Like these are high level objectives that kind of are represent more the DNA of a company.
Yeah.
So, and once you agree on all of those, then you can feed those into a set of algorithm or a set of company that can then optimize for those. That needs to have ways to measure them and way to optimize for them.
Yeah.
But this is where the real role of the shareholders come in. You don't need necessarily kind of a CEO to do that. You need kind of shareholders.
Well, I guess technically speaking, from a legal point of view, actually you don't want shareholders involved in that because from a legal point of view, you want to keep the shareholders' liability down. In order to keep shareholders' liability down, they're not involved in the day-to-day decision making, or even, largely, other than the super high strategic level, they're really not involved in that at all. And that's why you have a board of directors who take that level of responsibility instead. And that's why it gets really interesting with a self-thinking business, because if you have a shareholder, describe to me. I mean, we talked about this last year, but I would like you to describe to me the process that you think you enable through Honu.
So the process kind of that there are a few things, but I think the thing that we really, really want to get at on our side is like have one person or group of people like literally come up with an idea of a business. And then we literally let's take the example of a SaaS business. That's kind of what we're working towards now. And then you've got a team of agents that are going then to investigate kind of the business idea. They're going to come up with, they do a whole bunch of things. At the end of this, you'll come up with a kind of mini business plan with an idea of what the MVP looks like, all of this. And then it will set up the website, set up kind of the domain, set up the landing page, start building kind of the application, and then kind of put it, and then like put it out there, start collecting the information and start kind of making decisions kind of and running with it. So that's really kind of what we're going with. At Honu initially, like today, we're not focusing on medium size or kind of larger size. We're starting with more kind of micro businesses.
Yeah.
And what we're really trying to optimize for is like kind of time from 0 to your first sale and then kind of to your 2 million. Yeah. And a very high hit rate on companies that really kind of become profitable, right? So these are the things that we're focusing on. And the way we see it is that some of the very high level decisions, like will then be fed back to that initial person that kind of, I'm going to say quote unquote owns the business, because I think there's a very interesting conversation about what owning the business really means. And I think the question that you asked me or the challenge that you posed to me is, I think, something that we will need to start looking at. Yeah. Right. Like, as in, what does it look like from a regulatory kind of point of view, not from a company perspective, but also kind of from from governments. Right? Like, what does it mean for a company to be kind of mostly kind of autonomous? Yeah. Yeah. So what I was saying is, like, for any of the big decisions, whether it's like, look, we've been trying to run this, we already spent kind of $5,000. This doesn't kind of really make sense to me to pull the plug. I think that will come back to the business owner. Business owner needs kind of to make a decision on this. Or like, look, kind of, we've seen kind of these things. There's a big kind of decision in terms of we want to add kind of that product, right? Like, you might want to kind of, this is what we're thinking about. Do you want to have kind of a final kind of approval? You can do that. Or we've got kind of these complaints that seem kind of pretty serious to us. Yeah. Like, we really need to escalate this because this is how we're programmed. Yeah. You know, it's like, or there's a legal issue or someone kind of on Twitter is going to be gone completely kind of off the rails. We try to cope with it, but this is what's happening. So it's really kind of the very top kind of exec decisions that you want to kind of float back to the owner of the business, get their input, and then go and kind of try to operate as much as possible kind of on top.
There are a couple more things I really want to touch on before we run out of time. And one of the things that, as we're talking about these things, I'm thinking about the fact that the EU AI Act has just come into real play now. And that's trying to regulate for high risk and general purpose AI. Mm-hmm. And how do we design a system that is both autonomous and auditable in order to satisfy regulators here?
So I think there's autonomous businesses offer a higher opportunity for regulators to really understand the inner working of a business. Mm-hmm. Sorry, this might let me rephrase what I mean by this. In a world which is operated by humans, like, the human incentive is implicit and is tacit, right? And you can do things as of course, you can play with your accounting, you can make decisions which are kind of suboptimal, but there's no kind of ledger of the decision making. And what is it that you're really optimizing for, right? Like, were you optimizing for yourself as a CEO? Were you really optimizing for your shareholders? Were you optimizing on you kind of getting a commission kind of on, like,
and you can say one thing and it could be something completely different.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas in the case of an autonomous system, especially if it's built like through kind of these different layers, because everything is programmatic, everything that's programmatic has an input and has an output to it eventually. And there are things that are happening kind of inside. You can be very clear, like, first of all, you can follow the trace when it's kind of possible of the decision, because it's all kind of in code, it's all kind of written there. It's just kind of another log you can add. But I think the very interesting thing is, like, I think you can also, the regulator can ask for a very clear, for making kind of the objectives and the incentives of these AI very clearly stated. So if we go back to that example I was giving earlier about like a SaaS business or kind of an e-commerce business, and like, I think you do need to give as an input to a system that's running your business, what do you want them to optimize for?
Yeah.
Like you do need to do that. Like you do need to basically say, I want you to optimize for my customer satisfaction. I want you to optimize for this. I don't want you to do this. Like there's a set of rules that you need to input.
Yeah.
So that system, that AI system kind of becomes compliant to.
Yeah.
And I'm basically saying the regulators should ask for these to become explicit. As long as it's not trade secret.
Yeah.
And I'll give you another example where kind of that doesn't even necessarily apply for autonomous businesses. Like even if you look at today, like say how I know this might be controversial, but like when we're talking about regulating kind of social media, for instance, I mean, I would love for regulators to be like, it's not about you just giving us like algorithm, like literally tell us like, how are you weighing your decisions? Like, what is that algorithm really optimizing for? Are you optimizing for people to spend as much time as possible? Like, what are the rules you're putting in? What are the guardrails you're putting in? Like, as in, like, come up with some kind of format or some kind of way where you can make those kind of very clear, right? Because when you do that, like, I think that goes super hand in hand with what the regulators are doing with AI, but AI as an AI algorithm. What are the big algorithm trained on? What is the data that's going in? How are these being used? Right? So there's that. And then there's, okay, so assume this is already regulated. So it's like, we understand it's not kind of breaching any laws. And again, like, as you said with your disclaimer, like as in I'm most probably missing a lot of points as well, kind of from other TI Act, but like that AI algorithm is trained well, like we're okay with how it handles your data, all of this.
Yeah.
Brilliant. But then how is it optimizing your business is a whole different story.
Yeah.
So I'm saying these two should be complementary, right? It's be like, okay, so can you be explicit about what are the things that you're optimizing for in your business? Because you could be optimizing for basically social engineering of your customers.
But it's so funny because I mean, we're talking about this and I know you've talked before about the idea of a sole person running a multi-billion pound company, or $1 billion company. And when you talk about individuals, sole people doing that, that's a lot of power for one person. And to then say, and now we want you to make your thinking explicit on it too. How explicit do you think people are going to be?
So I think...
And how do you make that audible? How do you make that an auditable thing?
Well, if they're running it through autonomous businesses, through autonomous agents, like they need to input this as code or as an instruction or as data at some point. That's what I'm saying. It's like you can't escape it. Like you're not the one kind of running your business on a day-to-day. Yeah. So there's an input that's going into these algorithms, right? As like, what is that input? Like what did you tell them to optimize for? What did you tell them to do? What are we call like the compromises that you were kind of okay with it to do, right? Like as in, you need to do that because you're not running your business. You've got kind of an army of AI agents that are doing that.
So what do you instruct them to do?
Exactly. So it's literally as if you have an army and kind of you need to give them instruction for them kind of to do stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
But then and this is me throwing in a very, very deliberately provocative thing, is that you've also started seeing people who are using HR systems that are using AI to filter. And then you're also seeing people who understand that's what they're doing. And they're putting prompts in white text into their CVs to skew that result. Yeah. So actually, you talk about, the programming. Within the programming, there's also the data. Within the data, there's potentially risk for additional lines coming in through that. I mean, there's so many different things in the system. And this is why we talk about fiduciary duty and agency within the whole system. When you've got a closed loop system of agentic AI things talking to each other, and then you've got one person in charge. For me, I want to see the solution. And I also see, everywhere I look, I see the challenges within it, which I think is the right thing. We should all be looking at the challenges here because, we are moving very rapidly.
100%.
And I think that, one of the things that people will realize when they start, because I've got a number of other interviews lined up, is that we'll come back on these themes time and time again, because they're also not just themes that I'm having conversations about. Everyone, I think, in the industry is having the same questions. And I saw something from Anthropic just this morning. I think they released it a couple of days ago about their social impact, or societal impact team. And actually, we need to have these conversations as fundamentally bake it into the properly into the conversation. And I know I was in Rome last year, and someone from the Vatican turned up to come and talk to us about our just departed Pope and the Pope's point of view on AI. And it's fascinating that we have, even at that level, we're all talking about the same things. It's how do we comprehend all these challenges, and how do we make it so that we do maintain agency and responsibility and fiduciary duties within all this, and make it meaningful too.
I fully agree, but I think we need also to be looking things in their proper buckets, right? So as in, like, for instance, the example that you gave about like injecting kind of LLM prompts and stuff. I mean, like, I'm not sure this is going to be fixed through regulation, but this will be fixed through kind of new compliance standard, the same way that you have kind of security in enterprises, like whether kind of it's the SOC 2 or these things. Like, you want to make sure kind of you want to show that your systems are robust to external tapering, right? And I think in the world of LLMs, you've added kind of an additional opportunity for external systems to be able kind of to attack or to be able to taper with. And some standards will come in place, and you'll have kind of certifications, and you'll have also kind of better ways on doing that. So I think kind of that will be so. But to your point, I think what we were saying is that there's a whole ecosystem that is moving very, very quickly, that touches multiple components, including ethics, regulations, compliance, security, and all of these things, that is moving much faster than these, whether they're regulatory bodies or these different kind of bodies, are able kind of to move with it. Look, it's exciting, it's challenging, but I also don't think we should shy away from the challenge. And most importantly, we should approach it as a whole. We should look at the bigger picture in when this is getting approached. So what, like, when we're talking about autonomy, for instance, like, yes, we're all kind of talking about, say, kind of the billion-dollar one-person company and the problems that might pose. Fine. But we also kind of need to factor in, be like, hey, you've got millions of people also kind of in emerging economies, where you might open up the door of entrepreneurship to them. It's not about them becoming a billion-dollar business, but it's like, even if you can make it possible for them to start kind of a business, and they can be making $5,000. I mean, in some places, $5,000 a year is kind of life-changing.
Yeah.
Right. But you're democratizing business creation. I mean, economic freedom is also kind of freedom. Like, as an economic freedom is also kind of very, very important. And so I'm saying, like, we need to be able to look at this also kind of as a whole system.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say is, like, as much regulation as we want to do, and regulation is needed, and kind of oversight is needed, we also need to make sure that we don't fall into the trap of like trying to keep the ecosystem kind of the same, and just wanting, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, the nature of work is going to slightly shift.
Slightly?
I mean, slightly. Slightly, quote unquote, right? What it means to have knowledge is shifting. What it means to have skills is shifting. Your relationship to the enterprise will shift. Will you need to be kind of physically present? Will you be able to encapsulate your knowledge kind of in an agent, kind of get paid for it? Is this going to work? Is your knowledge going to be completely, like, unnecessary because most of it can be replicated by things that are online? Like, this is shifting. And so we need to make sure also kind of, as we're, like, whether there are regulations or like other things that are coming in, that we're also leaving room for the system to evolve organically. We could nudge it a bit, definitely we should nudge it, but let it room kind of to evolve, because what you don't want to end up in is like a way where kind of things are overregulated, and there's a system that basically has cracks that you're just kind of keeping in because it's trying to move in a different direction, right? And yeah, I mean, are we still going to have kind of 9-to-5 jobs?
I mean, it's fair. I mean, we see. I mean, Gartner is about to release a Magic Quadrant report, and they're reckoning that what you're doing is going to have significant impact on businesses this year in 2025. And people quiz me on, where I think the world's going to be. One of the benefits of working in this place is that I see things that a lot of people don't see. And I say to people, when you hear about things having an impact in 10 years' time, they're wrong.
Well,
if they say 5 years' time, they're wrong.
I couldn't agree more, honestly. Like, I don't think kind of that these timelines really apply anymore. Like, I think the shifts, whatever shift we've seen the last 2 years, which has been kind of phenomenal and great, I think we'll see more of that. And the timelines or time horizon that we used to look at, I think, are not valid as much.
Yeah.
In like systemic shifts happening in how things happen.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, there'll be delaying factors, like bigger enterprises that are already operating, that are really like, yes, they might be slow to adopt and be able, maybe slower than others, to be able to move.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen when you end up having, a company of 2 people being able to replicate a SaaS?
Well, we've just seen this recently with there was a legal tech company that's just done a deal with Microsoft, and that legal tech company this time last year wasn't even funded properly. And it's just a deal with Microsoft. Yeah. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting.
But also, I mean, the other thing which I think that the big conversation, and I mentioned to a couple of folk that I was talking to you today, and we had a conversation about trust and trust in the system. One thing is building an auditable system.
Yep.
An auditable system, and making sure that it autonomously runs and everything else. And how do you, and then and they've said, what about trust in the system, and how are people going to trust the system? And it makes me think about Google Maps. And when Google Maps first came out, people were driving to the edge of cliffs. They were driving, down paths, over roads they shouldn't have been driving down. They were actually, you were doing things like get to the ocean, then swim. Those kind of conversations, those kind of things. And absolutely, and yet it was used. And the more it was used, the better it got. Because I think that the question is always going to be, what's the alternative? And if for you, the alternative is somebody is not doing that, and then somebody says to do the thing, whatever it is that the prompt creates out of the business, the individual out there has this idea. If that is providing a solution to a problem that hasn't been addressed before, and therefore can do it better than someone else who's doing it, who's never done, there's no alternative to it. At that point, do people use it? And the answer was probably going to be, yes, they are.
Yeah.
And so very rapidly, you're going to build trust in the system, not because it's auditable, but because actually it fulfills a need and it's good enough. And so much of what we do about tech, I'm here, we're using my hand as a boom. It's good enough.
I mean, it's good enough. And then I think the other thing, just further counter your example, is like some people, like maybe it's not going to be usable by everyone, but most probably few people will crack how to use it in such a way that it works in one given situation.
Yeah.
Right. Or they create kind of systems around it that make sure that it works in a given situation, right? But so that angle or that stream will most probably be kind of the first adopters.
Yeah.
And it will also kind of create opportunities to sell these kind of guardrail systems around it, because, like in that case, kind of it works. And actually, if you do it like this, you can actually kind of build your company and get your million. Maybe kind of it's only like, it's only if you're to use these tools. Nothing else for now, but only with these tools you can get kind of very quickly to get something that's up and running and kind of make money from it. I mean, fine. Then the whole ecosystem is going to flock to start using it there, and then end up kind of expanding to other things.
I can completely see how we could carry on having this conversation and it will go on, because every time we have you say something, it fires off all sorts of thoughts in my head. Like, you make your money, but actually in a world where you don't need to work so much because you've got AI systems doing the work, and therefore people aren't earning money necessarily in the same way as they would do before. There's all sorts of other problems.
100%.
And so, let's not go down that avenue. There's too much to talk about there. But
if I may, I just want to say, so I think there's a lot of questions, but I don't think that there's any substitute to everyone thinking about it.
Yes.
Because the alternative of saying way too many questions, we need to keep things the way they are now, is not going to work.
No, absolutely.
And I think that's
one of the reasons for doing these conversations is because I want to be engaging in that.
100%. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. And I think the more these conversations happen, the more there is awareness.
Yeah.
The more that awareness will also kind of nudge even the direction of development of these technologies.
Yeah.
But what will definitely not work is like, let's just kind of freeze this. Let's not look to it. There's just like too complex. That's not going to work.
Yeah. Too complex is not the answer.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look at the clock again. We've almost been talking for an hour now.
Oh, wow.
This is so cool. Okay. So what I want to do, I promised one final question. Okay. Yeah. But before I ask the final question, I want to ask you, do you have anything that you want to ask or you want to say right now before we do the wrap-up question?
No, nothing. I mean, again, love the conversation. I think like one bit that is going to be interesting because we've spoken about regulation of this is, I think I'm excited. I think I see a world in which kind of as soon as next year, we will start having most probably kind of governments or free zones starting to look to think about sandbox environments for the creation of autonomous business. What does that look like? And I think that's going to be very exciting.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think kind of when DAOs were becoming a thing, like a few years back, you had a few states in the US that kind of started having regulations for what's a DAO, what does an autonomous entity really look like?
Yeah.
And I think kind of that, I mean, there's still kind of some endeavors there, but it's kind of mostly kind of died down. But I think kind of with this rise of autonomous businesses, I think that's going to become a very interesting kind of
We
topic.
are going to take this conversation offline because you mentioned to me when you were setting up for this call, you mentioned this for this meeting, and you mentioned that to me. I've actually spent a lot of time building a white paper now.
That's okay.
And there's so many aspects to go on this one. So I've got a plan. We'll talk about
amazing. I'm looking forward to hear it.
So but because we're not doing legal stuff, I'm not going to talk about.
All right, cool.
So my final question to you, and pause before you answer it if you want, or jump straight in there, is with this world of agentic AI and AI systems and the way in which it's going to encroach into our lives generally, and I don't think we truly know what that looks like yet. What does it mean to be human?
I mean, if nothing else, questioning what it means to be human. Like, if nothing else, what I mean by that is that I love that question because it's a question I've thought about and still think about a lot. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be? It's a more interesting question than what does it mean to be thinking.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, again, does thinking make us human? I know, like it's interesting. I don't have the answer to that, but I can tell you one thing that the reason I got into science kind of finishing my life is because, and it's not about being a scientist, it's about being a seeker. Right? And being a seeker as in kind of going through life with open eyes, like trying to understand things, but also not being afraid of asking the hard questions and being fascinated by truth or by kind of new knowledge coming up.
Yeah.
And it might be that a lot of what this agentic revolution is bringing is actually like a huge opportunity, but maybe kind of also a huge challenge of really starting to have to answer these questions. And I think that's a good thing. I like personally, like as in, I think it's a very good thing for us to start digging deeper in answering these questions. Like, I don't think it's only about thinking. I don't think it's just about language. Like, I do think that what makes us human is much, much, much bigger than being able to compute numbers and think and reason. I actually think thinking and reasoning might be in the way of achieving really kind of what we are as humans. So I think of it as an opportunity. And as in, coming back to my initial answer, if nothing else, like we as humans will question. AI systems and computers will not question unless you basically ask them. And again, the questioning there is like at best questionable.
Imad, thank you so much. I knew it would be a great conversation. I'm really pleased that this is the first one of a series, because I think it's going to frame so many more conversations off the back of it.
Thank you so
much.
much.
And I look forward to following up with you in the future.
Thank you so much. That was a real pleasure.
Just so you know, this podcast is for general information only. It's definitely not legal advice, and it doesn't create a lawyer-client relationship. Laws change, and they can be different where you live. So please don't rely on this when making decisions. If you need advice, speak to a lawyer. Every now and then, platforms might pop links or extra content alongside this podcast. They're not from me or Wilson Sonsini, and in some places, this episode counts as attorney advertising.